Trust in what's coming. Breathe. Trust in your knowing. Breathe. It's deeper and wider and holy. Breathe. Trust in what's coming. Trust in your knowing. It's deeper and wider and holy. Breathe in, breathe, breathe out. Breathe, breathe, breathe in, breathe, breathe out.
Thank you. Wonderful. Oh, wow. It's so good to see so many beloved faces. And to those of you that I don't know, I am so happy you are here. This is a night that I have been anxious to have happen. My name is Melissa, and I am the Spiritual and Cultural Organizing Manager at JVP. I do want to let you know that I'm recording because there are several people who couldn't make it tonight and really wanted to be here and want this information. So if you don't want your face or your name to be shown on this recording, you're welcome to turn your video off and just be here with us. But I'm very happy to see folks. It's a really hard moment right now in Palestine. There is tremendous violence going on. We are incredibly heartbroken, enraged, and organizing to deal with that in the best and the most ways that we can. And changing the narrative in the United States and wherever we are, that all Jews are Zionist is one big important way that we have to be working at. And so that you are here, that you are interested in creating Havurah to make that narrative ever stronger is just really positive. If you are a member of JVP, and I hope you are, please come to our members meeting on the 25th, where I'll be putting the link later in the chat, because we will be talking about what is exactly happening on the ground. We have members who are in constant conversation with our partners, Palestinian and Israeli partners there. And we will have an up-to-date report. And also we'll be talking about what we can do, whether that's making calls, whether that's being out in the street all the ways that we can support our Palestinian friends and in the ways that they're asking us to do so. So we're going to get down to the business of creating and sustaining Havurah. I am going to pass this off to a most fabulous facilitator, Jade Brooks. I am so pleased that she is able to be here and be our facilitator tonight, and just has been amazing in helping to organize this event. And I pass it off to her. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. Hello, everybody. A shout out to Melissa, who's very much doing double duty care work and also holding this call space. So we're blessed to have you here and making space. Thank you all again for coming. And we're really privileged tonight to have 3 guest speakers who I'm going to ask and invite to introduce yourselves in just a moment. But yes, my name is Jade. I use the pronoun she and her. I live on Lumbee, Occoneechee, Saponi, and Shakori lands known as Durham, North Carolina. And this was a long-held dream of Melissa and this space tonight, in part because I'll say for myself, being a part of a Havurah really changed my cultural, spiritual, and political direction. And shout out to at least one person on this call who was part of that Havurah with me. But I think the kind of community space, the ritual space, but almost most importantly for me, the politicization around anti-Zionist politics that I received from breaking bread, from singing, from collective prayer with people who really cared about me and wanted to see me grow and change was like no other experience I've had in the movement. And so for a long time, we've thought, how could we learn from those who have been cultivating these beautiful local or mostly local ritual and political and cultural spaces, and learn for all of us, how do you get going? What are some tips and tricks? What would you not suggest doing? Like over processing till the cows come home, let's say, just different things that could have real life applications so that the movement that we want to see grow and flourish is created. So with that, I'm going to ask our speakers to introduce ourselves, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about the flow of the call, just so you know what to expect. But the questions, again, my fine friends, are, could you share your name, your pronouns, where you live, and who are your people? Which is a question that comes from Miss Ella Baker, one of the co-founders of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and the Southern Freedom Movement leader. So who are your people? And Elliot, could we start with you?
Yes, my name is Elliot Botsetic. I'm in Philadelphia, which was very clearly Lenape land till Penn and his son showed up. I am a co-founder of Fringes, which is a non-Zionist Havurah that was founded in 2007, which seems like a long time ago, but also maybe yesterday. My people are broken and holy and poets and musicians and prophets, and nobody really likes a prophet. And from my birth community that's rural and poor, and my chosen adult community that is urban and definitely more middle class and college educated, and everyone whose heart can't heal until there's more justice in the world.
Thank you, Elliot. Welcome. Thank you for being here. May, could we pass it to you? I think, sorry if I broke up for a second. May, could we pass it to you next?
My name is May. I use she, her pronouns, and I live on Quinnipiac land in what is now known as New Haven, Connecticut. I am the rabbinic intern with Mending Minyan, and I am learning who my people are here locally where I'm based. But broadly speaking, I think my people are troublemakers. And I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Beautiful, right on. And last but not least, Mark.
Hi, my name's Mark, and I use he, him pronouns, and I live on Chochenyo Shoshone land in the East Bay area. And I'm part of a synagogue called Kehila, which is based in Oakland, California. And I'll get into it more later, but our Havurah is actually within that synagogue. My people include the members of the synagogue, but beyond that, the Bay Area is known for its progressive movements, and I sort of have been involved in many of them. In our congregation, there's also a strong immigration support movement, and I'm part of that. Palestinian organizations are partners, and I consider them my people as well. So the Arab Resources and Organizing Center, American Muslims for Palestine, and Palestine Youth Movement folks are really close ally. Well, we hope we're close allies of them, and we try to be in support of their call.
Thank you so much, Mark, and thank you all. We're really grateful and blessed to have your leadership represented tonight. I want to give a few housekeeping tips on Zoom. Some of us spend many hours on this machine and maybe others not so much. So one thing that's happening right now is there's actually a live transcript that you can see if you click on the more, it's called on mine, the more button, and there's 3 little dots. And for me, it says view subtitle. And that might be helpful if to read along as you're listening, or for any other reason. And you'll see that Melissa and maybe others in the chat are posting with an asterisk, like phrases and words, and that's an attempt to correct the transcript if there's errors or things we know aren't right. So just if you see that and are like, what's going on? I wanted to explain that. And also, you may have noticed that we all introduced ourselves referring to the land of the people, the people who first cared for and stewarded the land where we live on. So I just want to take a moment and say we do this practice recognizing that many of us are settlers as well to this land where we live, and that in our resistance to Zionism in Palestine, we must also stand in resistance to settler colonialism where we live. And so there's a website, I'm sure many people know, that you can look up your address and hear or find the people who steward and who are indigenous to the land where you live. So I just wanted to demystify that for a minute. Where we're going to go next is asking our 3 panelists to speak a little bit about the history and the structure of the Havurot they are part of. We're going to hear some advice from them, and then we'll have a chance for Q&A, just to let everybody know. And also be thinking, if you are part of a Havurah or some other formation that's relevant, we'd love to hear from you tonight on the call. And then we'll go next to Melissa will share some incredible resources for others that exist to share, all kinds of resources for ritual and cultural space that the Havurah Network has put together. And we'll also have a chance to talk more about ritual together at the end of the call, and maybe do some together. So that was kind of a quick insert. But where we're going tonight. Okay, I'm seeing if somebody was jumping in with a question. All right, so we shall begin. I think Anybody can start of the three of you, but the first question is going to be, could you share how and why your Havurah got started and describe it for us a little bit?
I guess I'll jump in. Sure. So Fringes is a feminist, non-Zionist Havurah. We were founded here in Philly in 2007. It grew out of a lot of other kinds of coming together around Judaism and activism and forming communities. And I just want to talk about that very briefly because there are many different things that a Havurah can be, especially a Havurah of activists. And I feel like I've kind of been in all of them before Fringes came along. So a Havurah can be really kind of almost a political alliance group. Like this Havurah is where we get together to do X political content work together. And Philly has one of those that's excellent called Tikkun Olam Havurah, which is activists working out of their Jewish identities and values on a whole bunch of social justice issues. They're marvelous. It can be, we want to do Shabbat dinner because we're non and anti-Zionist Jews and we don't feel welcome other places and we enjoy each other's company tremendously and we want to have Shabbat dinners once a month. Or it could be a group that forms within a synagogue in order to push issues about justice in Palestine within that synagogue. Fringes kind of started that way till we got kicked out. It can be a group that wants to come together and use Jewish holidays and Jewish liturgy and Jewish symbolism to do kind of big public protests for Palestinian civil rights, sort of using our Jewishness to push that. Here in Philly, once we did a all-night camp out for Pesach in front of the Israeli consulate, starting with a play about Deir Yassin with a survivor from Deir Yassin there to talk about it, and going through a sunrise morning service, all blocking the door of the consulate the entire time. That was one kind of Havurah. So there's a lot of different things that you can be. Fringes, when we got together, because we were all part of activism communities where we would do that work together, what we wanted from our Havurah was a different way to pray. Our synagogue life was not meeting our needs at all. And we wanted to make a Shabbat morning service community. We wanted it to feel different. We wanted it to be a place where the assumption was that you did not support Israeli politics, rather than that having to be something we fought about. The assumption was you did not. And there were some people who liked the services who didn't feel comfortable calling themselves non-Zionist, but in this space, we were not going to argue about that. That was the given for us. But we also wanted a place with a different kind of liturgy. We weren't happy just saying the traditional words every week. And we wanted a better musical life than our synagogue was offering us at the time. So we formed a very intentional service, Shabbat morning service community. Our motto was, we were a feminist, non-Zionist Havurah, and our motto was prayers that sing and songs that pray. So we wanted to be a place where activists came together, not to do activism, but to get their hearts and their spirits held and fed so that they could come into this home, right? The kitchen table, they could come to the kitchen table and get fed, and then they could go out into the world to do activism. So our Havurah does not sign petitions. We don't show up with signs of protest. We do individually, but not as a Havurah. We don't do any of those things. We were founded around a statement of our values, including a whole statement about being non-Zionist. But we are very much, Fringes is a prayer community that feeds the spirits of activists so that we can better do what we do in the world. We meet the second Saturday of every month. We've been meeting since February of 2007. We've done high holidays for 9 of those years, along with Linda Holtzman and Tikkun Olam Havurah. and we went virtual via Zoom, and now we're staying virtual because that allowed our community to go national, which has been really lovely for us, and help find all of the people who didn't quite have a home in any Jewish community come together and have a home here. So that's what we do. And I can show you a little later on some of how our resources are stored, but I'll save that for a little later on in the conversation.
Thanks so much, Elliot. That was wonderful. How about you, Mark? Could you tell us a little bit about your Havurah?
Sure. So the Havurah that I'm part of is called the Havurah for a Free Palestine, and it's based in Kehillah Community Synagogue, which is in Oakland, California. Kehillah is a very lively activist community that has wonderful liturgy, and it has a lot of social activism involved with it. It is one of the fastest growing synagogues in the Bay Area, so it's really drawing a lot of people. Our Havurah is lucky in the sense that we have been offered a place, a home within our synagogue. And Kehillah is a non-Zionist synagogue, which is not at all an anti-Zionist in terms of explicitly. There's a range within the congregation. And so we felt the need to have, I know Elliot talked about primarily spiritual or liturgy or ritual. Well, ours is probably not primarily that. Ours is the other type of Havurah where we are trying to provide a home for people within the synagogue who want to be actively supporting the struggle for justice in Palestine, and we want to be moving our synagogue in that direction. So we have as a goal to move our synagogue toward support of BDS and toward making clear statements as a synagogue when the horrible things that are happening in the world happen, to speak out as an entire congregation. And we've had some success with that, not always. And I can go into more details later about how we function, but just real briefly, one of the things that we felt was important was to come together around a set of principles that are clearly anti-Zionist, so that we do not want to have arguments about that issue, about whether are we going to support BDS, or are we going to take leadership from our Palestinian partners? These are questions that we feel are settled, and that people who agree with that are welcome to join our Havurah. We have a steering committee, and I'll talk more about that, and then we have general meetings, and I can go into more detail about how that functions. Later, I'll also show you the ways in which we've been able to actually have a space, for example, on the webpage of our synagogue, that we're very grateful that we're allowed that. Our Havurah has about 8 to 10, I think 10 people now in our steering committee, and then we have general meetings that are larger than that. And I'll talk more about that later. But that gives you some background.
Thank you, Mark. This is exciting and really great to hear. And last but not least, May, could you share a little bit about Mending Minyan?
As I said, I'm with Mending Minyan on Quinnipiac land in New Haven, Connecticut. A cool thing about Mending Minyan is that we come out of the JVP Havurah Network. So in 2017, I want to say, the JVP Havurah Network had their inaugural Shabbaton. And at the time, I was sitting next to this wonderful human by the name of Ali Warshaw before a talent show at this Shabbaton. And Ali said to me, "Hey, I'm like building, I'm like praying with this group of people in New Haven, Connecticut. And we're going to be having our high holiday services in the Palestine Museum. Can you join us? Can you be our rabbi?" And I was like, "What?" you're having Rosh Hashanah services in a Palestine museum. First of all, like, what? There's a Palestine museum close to me? Cool. And secondly, you're like in a practice Jewish ritual on Rosh Hashanah in the space. And she was like, yeah, can you come lead for us? Unfortunately, I had to say no at the time. I was the rabbinic intern at Tzedek Chicago with Rabbi Brant Rosen. But I actually passed over the reins of leading that service to my classmate at the time who's on this call. So shout out to Rabbi Lonnie. In any case, after that interaction, I kind of just kept thinking about New Haven as the years went by. And I was like, why do I keep thinking about New Haven? And then I realized, oh, there's this thing happening there. And so in 2020, like, this is my 3rd year with them. So yeah, I don't do math. But yeah, like 3-ish years ago, I want to say, I reached out to Ali and I was like, hey, do y'all think you would ever want a rabbi? She's like, whoa, like, I never thought this was going to be an offer that we would ever get. I don't know if I said, I'm in my 6th and final year of rabbinical school. That's probably helpful clarifying information. And Ali went back to the community and they had a conversation about it. And she was like, okay, well, go ahead and start doing some one-to-ones and let's see how this goes. And so basically the first year I started doing some one-to-ones and getting to know community members and hear their dreams and like what has Mending Minion meant to them so far as like a really, you know, from the ground up, just group of friends who are gathering, like politically aligned Jewish friends who are gathering to do ritual together. And then the second year came around and they're like, we think we'd be up for you coming up to New Haven 1 weekend a month and meeting our people and seeing how things go. And as of June, I live in New Haven and I am officially a rabbinic intern with the community. The community had a process. It's like a pretty big decision to decide that you're okay with having a rabbi. And the community has talked a lot about it. And the reason is that it kind of changes the power dynamic. Even if we talk about power, there's an inherent power dynamic in terms of like bringing in clergy or rabbinic leadership. And I can talk more about that later in terms of our structure. But yeah, so since June, I've been here and working with the community. Over the high holidays, we were back inside of the Palestine Museum, this time not only for Rosh Hashanah, but also for Yom Kippur, which was, I don't even have words. We were, you know, praying the penitential prayers of Yom Kippur while Israeli settlers were praying the exact same prayers while blocking the entrance to Nablus, Palestine. And so again, I can talk more later about what it means to be Jews practicing in that space, which I feel like is a really central question to what we do at Mending Minion. We don't always exist in the Palestine Museum. Most often we exist in people's homes, in backyards, and sometimes in parks and other outdoor spaces. But a realization that we came to as we were having community conversations and gearing up to be in the Palestine Museum was it doesn't matter if we're in the Palestine Museum or not. As anti-Zionist Jews, we need to be having these questions about what it means to practice Jewish ritual in Palestinian space or in relationship to Palestine. And so some of the questions that we were thinking about then, you know, in addition to like, what does it mean to be anti-Zionist Jews and practicing in the space is like, well, what's the use of Hebrew? What's the use of the shofar, right? Like a sacred ritual object, but also an instrument that is used to evict Palestinians from their homes and terrorize and traumatize them. And same for the Hebrew language. So these are all questions that we are wrestling with at Mending Minion.
Wow. Thank you all three so much for sharing. And again, we're so lucky to hear these three pretty different models and different lengths of time and tradition and lessons. So I know it's going to be a rich conversation. The next question is going to get into some of the nuts and bolts. So we'd love you to talk about, and people sort of went there, started to go there already. Give us a sense of how you function. How do people connect? How often do you meet? How do new people join? Where are resources kept? Not in an attempt to be like, yeah, super nitty gritty, but just to give a sense of if people were interested in this structure or seeding or replicating this structure somewhere else, how do y'all work? And let's see, maybe we'll go the other direction just to switch it up. So May, could you start with that?
I guess the first place I want to go back to is kind of our structure and how we run. I mentioned that I think one way that we're different from the other communities on this call is that I'm there, that there's a rabbinic presence, a rabbinical intern at this point, but hopefully in May, a rabbi. As I said, there were lots of conversations before I joined the community about what that means, because Manding Minyan had historically been a lay-led community and really prides themselves on being a lay-led community. Before I moved here, the community came up with an admin structure, which I feel very grateful and supported by. So there's a person who kind of like chairs education at the synagogue, and there's someone who's like the admin person who kind of convenes the admin team for monthly meetings. There's someone who's like the ritual chair. There's someone who's a social justice chair whose job is like networking with other social justice orgs and doing solidarity work in the city. And they created this beautiful diagram in terms of like what would the rabbi's role be in this structure. And they decided that the rabbi is not just another role, right? So I don't get my own box in this structure that says rabbi. What I am is, if you imagine all these roles in a circle, I'm kind of like the scratching lines that connect all of them together, right? So in many ways, back and I kind of am able to hold the zoomed out view of what's happening and kind of hold people's dreams of what this community should be, and share them with people and tend to them. But really, I see my role as rabbi as one of facilitator and of organizer, right? If you came to our high holiday services, I gave one of the Divrei Torah, I gave one of the sermons, right? So we still aspire, even though I'm there, to anything that lay leaders, congregants, whatever you want to call them, are able to do, they do it. So for Shabbat, that means I don't do much. I'm not giving sermons. I'm like there to facilitate if need be, and to like fill in the gaps if there's no one who's volunteered to lead a certain part of the service. For high holidays, it means I do a little bit more, because there's a lot that's kind of like rabbinic, like things that I learned in rabbinical school that maybe others may not have the knowledge to lead, for example. But I have so many congregants who like laned Torah, who chanted Torah for us on the high holidays. You know, I had 3 other people give sermons, and I had 2 other people frame our Torah readings. So it's really a lay-led community, and I'm kind of just there as support. And something that I've come to realize recently is that I most likely will not be with this community forever. When I first came up with this dream, I thought I was going to move to New Haven and die in New Haven, right? And just like live my whole life building this community. And now that I'm here and working with the lay leadership, I'm like, I'm here to listen to your dreams and give you all the information and knowledge and wisdom I may have, and then let y'all go back to being lay-led and do your thing and be beautiful and doing this work. And then maybe I'll go and support a community elsewhere. But that feels really important to what we do. What are the other questions? How often do we meet? It's varied. right? So pre-pandemic, they were meeting like, well, pre-pandemic, maybe they weren't meeting so often, but during the pandemic, they were meeting weekly on Zoom. And then it became bi-weekly. Now it's monthly. It ebbs and flows with seasons. But we do meet regularly. As to how people join, it's a lot of word of mouth. We have a mailing list that people reach out to us and ask to be added to so that they can stay in touch. Something else that I want to say about our community is that we do serve a lot of marginalized folks. I would imagine that's true about most of the communities represented on this call. But one of my favorite things about Mending Minion is there's a lot of elders, which I find to be really sweet and dear. And I'll just share kind of my favorite story. When we first started having these community conversations in leading up to the high holidays, we were asking, what does it mean to be an anti-Zionist synagogue? What does it mean to be in that space? And at one point we broke off into pairs. And so we were talking to the person next to us. And the person that I was speaking to self-identified as a Zionist and also as coming from the modern Orthodox community. So a community that's most definitely much more halachic and observant than kind of the practice that we currently have in Mending Minion. And at the end of the conversation, the person said to me, May, this is the warmest community that I've ever been a part of. And even though I really disagree with the language of non-Zionism and anti-Zionism, this is the Jewish community that I feel most at home in. And on Yom Kippur, this person walked to the Palestine Museum, probably a 45 or so minute walk from where he lives. And he joined us for the entire service, stayed to talk with me after, and then walked back to New Haven proper to join his modern Orthodox community for the remainder of Yom Kippur Day. So our community ranges age, ranges gender, ranges race, and ranges in observance and practice and denomination. So I can take more questions later, but I think that's a good start for us. Thanks.
Amazing start. Thank you so much. Wow, that story. Mark, we'll kick it to you next.
Well, so our Havurah is really not that old. It's really been in existence about 1.5 years now. I think it's sort of important to understand in terms of Kehillah Synagogue, there are numerous groupings, Havurot around various issues, economic justice, Jews on a lonely land, deals with the issue of settler colonialism of Native peoples here, and immigration work, which I'm also part of, besides our Havurah. So, and there also has been a Middle East Peace Committee that's existed for a long time in the synagogue, and they basically are, I would say, united around a set of what I would consider to be kind of liberal Zionist principles. You know, ending the occupation, Israel makes a lot of mistakes, and we're very concerned about that. But not prepared to really question the fundamental principles of Zionism. And so our Havurah felt that there was a need to create a group that really was going to be much more clearly defined as anti-Zionist within a congregation that is basically non-Zionist. So it was a little, I would say, uncomfortable for some of the people in the Middle East Peace Committee initially, because they felt like, well, why can't we just work together? And so we had a job of really kind of explaining to them that for us, it was really important to have a group that was clearly united around anti-Zionism, support for BDS. We were not going to discuss and argue those things within our meetings. We would happily join with the Middle East Peace Committee on a number of different activities. We have people who are in both groups. And so I think that by being very kind of principled about what we stand for and very understanding that we are not seeing ourselves as opposed to the Middle East Peace Committee, but we have a different frame and a different purpose. And I think that was very, very important and helpful. I don't know if now would be a good time to share my screen, if that's okay.
Go for it.
Okay. Let's see if I can do this without, I guess I have to pick what I'm sharing. And so we were very lucky to be able to have a space right on the Kahila Community Synagogue. Can people see this?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so this is the Kahila Community Synagogue webpage, which has, many, many parts to it, but this is our spot within it. And, I think that we feel very lucky that we were able to develop that kind of relationship with the spiritual leadership, who, some of whom privately share some of our views, some of whom are not quite ready to call themselves anti-Zionists. But we have written a letter to the Kahila community explaining who we are. I don't want to go through it here, but I will put maybe a link to this page in the chat as a way for people to kind of see what our principles are. I think I mentioned earlier that we have a steering committee, and we felt like that was an important way to organize ourselves. The steering committee is people that sort of know and trust each other and work well together and are clearly in support of the principles of anti-Zionism that are kind of expressed in this webpage here. We do have monthly open meetings, and I can give you a little idea. So in the open meetings, we plan events and have discussions. So here was an event that we planned within the open meetings. It was a Tashlich for Free Palestine. And it was really wonderful. It was held near the Bay, San Francisco Bay. And it was really, really well received. So that's kind of an activity that we do. We have as a goal to really push our congregation to come to a point of supporting BDS, and actually we'd love to be another anti-Zionist congregation, but that would be a process that we recognize is going to take some time, and we're going to have to do some education. So in order to carry out that education, we plan to do workshops and have book and discussion and film series. So a workshop that is coming up on November 9th is a workshop on BDS. And we're going to really try to demystify BDS and really invite as widely as we can congregants who have concerns or questions about it. We'll get more into some of the things we've learned, but one of the things that we've learned, I think, is how to balance being clear and firm on our principles, but also very open and welcoming. And I think May gave the example of someone she sat next to who was a clearly a Zionist, but who could really obviously listen and hear an anti-Zionist perspective. We try to offer that, where we create a space where we can hear what other people's are saying, what their concerns are. So when we have a BDS workshop, we expect that there are going to be people who have concerns and differences and disagreements with BDS. And we've really learned, I think, a lot about how to have discussions that both we can be clear on what we stand for, but also can listen and speak to the concerns that people raise in those settings. So I think that kind of gives an idea of where we're at and how we function. People can ask questions later, and I can maybe give some more details later.
Thanks for the show and tell, Mark. That was great.
Okay.
Really helpful. All right. How about Elliot? Could you talk a little bit about Fringe's structure?
Yeah, let me share the screen. So Fringes, we were founded by 3 people who spent 4 or 5 months doing all of the background work of the original thinking through of what would it like if we weren't going to do traditional liturgy, what would a service look like? And what kinds of words did we want to pray? And we read a lot of Rachel Adler, who's a Jewish feminist theologian. And we looked through a lot of prayer books and we thought a lot about songs. And so the three of us sort of came up with an original plan. I like to call it the Marge Piercy, Mary Oliver Siddur, that first one, because those are the two poets that we knew. It's grown. And came up with the first service. And for a year or so after that, we would try to get groups of people together to meet to plan each service in advance. That is really difficult in people's lives. The initial enthusiasm was great, but after about 6 months, finding a single night of the month that anyone had in common became really challenging. The leadership is sometimes shared. The Torah study is often shared, but we have probably over the last 6 years now really settled into, we have co-leaders. I write the liturgy in consultation with Karen Eskevitz, who's also known as Otter, who's our musical leader and also composes original music for us. I do a draft of the service. I run it past her. She's really good at how energy moves. So then she gives me feedback. We wrangle it and come up with the final service, and we do it that way. And then as often as possible, invite members of the community to do our Torah studies. Torah studies very free-flowing for us. It's some kind of text or some kind of idea. It has been all manner of things. It is occasionally Torah and sometimes a little bit of Talmud. But it can also be when the Black Lives Matter movement put out that statement that got so many Jewish communities up in a flutter. Our Torah study was to read that out loud together and talk about it, to read pieces about white supremacy, to read pieces about Israel and Palestine, to read pieces about racism, things like that. When Pete Seeger died, our Torah study was, we reenacted out loud his hearing before the House Un-American Activities Committee, just to honor what a social activist that he had been. And it was lovely and funny and kind of heartrending to think how much that committee still, and the anti-Semitism of that committee influenced our lives today. So we've done a lot of things over 15 years. We are organized pretty smoothly at this point. We have this website that you're seeing. If you want to know anything about us, it's probably here. Our founding statement is here. Our original statement from 2007 about why we define as non-Zionist is here. Every past service that we've ever done for all 15 years is all here, and you can just download it for yourself. A lot of the original liturgy that has been created for Fringes is here. A bunch of special services that we've done over the years just to sort of show how you can create a Shabbat morning service that's profoundly built around addressing one idea and not just having one poem thrown into another service, but how do you build an entire service around some, pressing social or political issue. So you can find a lot of those here just to see how it works. And we organize through, we have a MailChimp mailing that goes out. We find people in all kinds of ways. When we were founded, a lot of us all belonged to the same synagogue. And it was brutal, honestly. They kicked us out and they accused us of trying to blow them apart. And they, at some point, set the three of us down and had this meeting. And they said, we felt like in your letter about this, you said you hated the synagogue. And we read out loud the letter that we had written. And we're like, but that's not what we said. This is what we said. And they said to us, well, this isn't about the facts. This is about how we felt about it. And so we eventually all left. Certainly the founding of the JVP Havurah Network has really changed us. We met a lot of new musicians. We met a lot of great new challenging ideas. We talk a lot more about Jews of color, Sephardi Mizrahim, and white supremacy within Judaism than we did before JVP. And I'm very grateful for the ways those conversations, I've brought them back and moved my Havurah along. I do a lot of service leading for JVP, the service before the election, the week of services that happened while the trial of the killer of George Floyd was happening. So I meet a lot of people that way, and sort of they like the services that they see. So then I tell them about fringes. So I certainly do a lot on that kind of national stage, which, draws people to what we do. I'm also always happy to share these resources. If you think you'd love to put some kind of service together around a topic, you're always welcome to download these. These are public, but also just ask me, and I'm always happy to step in and help people. Let me just stop sharing so I can see everybody better. I've spent 15 years now between doing this, the years when we were doing political Jewish holidays, like we did a Tu B'Shvat Seder that was basically about how to take apart Zionism for people, that we did in, I think, 26 cities the first year that we did it through JVP. I've got a long history of this liturgy, and I'm happy to share. And I'm also really happy to just listen to ideas that you have and kind of give you input, because I really love doing this. So, and I've got whole essays on what makes a poem work as liturgy as opposed to poems that don't work as liturgy. What does it mean to be doing liturgy? I have all this work, and I love to help. So really, you can just email me and we can set up a Zoom, and I'm very happy to step in. I also have the infamous, for other people who write liturgy, I have the famous database of 1,000 poems that work as liturgy that I've built over the years. So I'm really happy to help seed and feed other congregations, because I think finding prayer that says the words our hearts need, but that we don't know our hearts need. I can't fix the whole damn world, but I'm a poet myself, right? I can make words that help people's hearts be not quite so broken, so that they can go out and do all the things that I don't have the energy or time to do myself. And it's kind of what I have to give to the world. So I'm very happy to give it.
So incredibly generous, Elliot, and so moving. Thank you. Oh my gosh. I want to run, not walk to that website and watch the Pete Seeger reenactment and many others. Thank you so much, each of you. We're just going to do one more round of a sort of final comment before juicy Q&A, I'm sure. And so could you each just share one thing that you might recommend if people are considering starting a Havurah to avoid doing, and one thing that you would definitely suggest doing that you think has worked for you all? Mark, I'm going to go to you first.
Well, I think one of the things to avoid that I think we've learned is not to be too preachy. When we work with people beyond our steering committee, really to avoid, the whole thing in terms of meeting agreements where they talk about take space, make space. I think we really need to not take too much space ourselves. We can be clear, but we need to. The flip side of it is make space for the new people that we come in contact with to really sort of express their doubts, concerns, and questions, and to really listen well. So I guess that's both what we should do and what we should not do.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. How about you, Elliot? One thing you'd suggest avoiding and one thing to definitely do?
To avoid burnout by not thinking that you can solve everything at once with one Havurah or one service. Any one community can't do everything. And that's okay. That's why we have these lovely, intersecting, ever-changing, ever-flowing communities. So, of course, you have to push yourself, but of course, you also have to be gentle to yourself, because this is a long fight. This is a long, long fight. I think one thing to do, and it's connected to that, be clear about your mission for whatever this group is. And also know that group could reach an end of its work, right? Like that, we had a very activist group here in Philly that was, it kind of was JVP and then it wasn't. But one of our founding statements was, we want to make sure that people stop thinking the US Jewish community is all Zionist. And we did an ungodly amount of work for 10 years. And then people moved and people got older or people had kids but then one day the New York Times had a huge headline that said, oh my God, not all US Jews are Zionists anymore. And we're like, okay, we've accomplished our mission. It's okay that this community has scattered and gone on to other jobs now. So just be clear about your purpose for this community. Be flexible when that needs to change. And it's okay to let go of something whose time or tide has passed, and to just know that something new will come out of it. Don't hang on just for the sake of the fact that you did believe in it. So know who you are, know when to give it energy, and know when it's time to say, thank you for having existed. Now we need a different thing.
Freaking life lessons.
If I were as good at doing that as I am at saying that, I would have left jobs a long time ago.
Thank you, Elliot. That is so great. All right, how about you, May? What's one suggestion you would give and something to avoid?
Yeah, I think the thing to do is be proudly anti-Zionist. We have more than enough shuls that are explicitly or not explicitly Zionist. And I think it's really imperative that we are unwavering in saying that we are anti-Zionist. It's not exclusionary, as I hope you've heard in the anecdotes and stories that I've shared. But I think it's important to kind of be out and proud as anti-Zionists. And I guess in terms of like the don't category, or like a kind of cautionary tale, is I would say be mindful about who and how you center people in your rituals. How you center or don't center Jewish grief and Jewish pain, how you do or don't center Palestinians and Palestinian grief and pain, and be really careful of appropriation. So just, I would say, like, be very clear in everything that you're doing and know the why.
Hear, hear. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you all for these incredible words of wisdom and really specific, very thorough, really powerful stories. Melissa, I'm gonna pass it back to you for the Q&A. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Wow, they were dropping wisdom. That was amazing. So what in our last half hour, we're gonna just would like to share some other resources. What you have already, if you go to these websites, is a lot. But here's a little bit more. And of course, I really recommend that you take up these amazing offers to check out the work that people have done from 15 years, Elliot's work from 15 years ago, to the work at Kahila, to in the Havurah for Free Palestine, and what Minding Menyon has been doing and is doing now. They all offer so much. It's pretty fabulous. Here, I'm going to share some resources. Now, I do want to mention again that on the 25th of October, you are most welcome to come to a quarterly meeting, and here is the registration in the chat, where we will be talking about what's happening on the ground and in Palestine and what we can also do. Now, another thing that a website that I would recommend you go to is, surprise, surprise, JVP.org. And it's in the process of being revamped, but I will tell you, go there and go to the menu that says resources. And at resources, you'll see JVP Havurah Network. And there's lots of material there, a lot of which we have Elliot to thank for. And I am always crediting her for so much work that she did for us as a community. And I'm always sorry that her name does not show up, but I want you to know that she's responsible for a lot of work there. Also go to the menu and read about, and go into the newsroom and subscribe to our JVP Wire. This comes out several times a week and is short, succinct, and has actions. Sometimes they're JVP Havurah Network actions. Sometimes they're directing you to something that JVP Action, our political electoral politics arm of JVP, is organizing. And I really recommend you subscribe to that. It's called The Wire. And if you go in the menu to get trained, there's a number of topics that can be really useful to a new Havurah. Maybe what you want to do is just sit down together and talk about, what is the Nakba? What does that mean? What is the ongoing Nakba? So there's material called Facing the Nakba, which means the calamity, the catastrophe rather, which is also the calamity. There's also a listing there of the free film library. And this is also a great way that your Havurah could gather together as a first activity and watch a film and discuss it. You could do it as an in-house thing just for a small group of people, or you could open it up to the community and maybe meet more people who are interested in being part of anti-Zionist group of people who are practicing and want to also practice their Judaism beyond Zionism. So here is also, and I hope this is the right, wait a second, I'm sorry. I want to get to the link to give you some more resources. If you happen to look at the resources this year for the high holidays, I curated, okay, here we go. And Mending Minyan is in there. Activities from Tikkun Olam are there. And okay, so you can open that up. And when you do, you will see that there's the 21 grief technologies that the Havurah Network put out last year. I know Beth Brook is on this call, and they were really pivotal in making this happen. I'm always grateful to them for that. There's a few different prayers. This is kind of a little potpourri of resources that you might find in any of the other places that you're looking, and maybe this will just stimulate some ideas. The Sheheki Yanu is something that I downloaded from Ritual Well, which is a resource from the associated with the Reconstructionist lineage, and it's a good place to go for information and maybe rituals. And in this PDF, they don't about this prayer that we say when we're doing something for the first time, and I'm sure you all know this, is one of the few sites that doesn't list going to Israel for the first time. So kudos to Ritual Well. Here's a blessing for studying Torah, which comes from Hinenu, not Hinenu, from Kol Tzedek in Baltimore. Oh, Philly, I'm sorry.
Hinenu, Baltimore, Colsetic, Philly.
Exactly. You know, I just like love them so much.
Sibling
put them all
sibling
together.
groups, but different.
Yes, yes. Well, I did some amazing Torah study with them during the month of Elul, and we said this every day. This prayer for justice, I learned from Elliot from going to Shabbat services, which I can't praise enough. And I use this prayer for justice all the time. And I think it's a wonderful, also a very wonderful prayer for a lot of our colleagues who are prayer phobic. So this one is one that people love. In this Elul offerings, you'll see listings of other synagogues and other events that were pretty exciting during this holy days. This flash ritual for Palestine actually begins with a prayer. I love that your Siddur was Mary Oliver and who was the other one? Elliot, I'm sorry.
At first it was all Mary Oliver and Marge Piercy. Now we have like 800 poets, but originally we had two.
Those two are still beloved. And this one begins with a prayer about what prayer is, and which is really just finding the words to open your heart. And then an opening circle that I just did recently, but just to give you some ideas, it's not super polished. It's just like, here are some ideas. And I really recommend that you just go for it that way. And this is a Palestine guide. It says comprehensive. I would say it's a guide. It has a lot of information, and like every guide is not comprehensive. It doesn't have everything, but it will help point you maybe in a direction that you might need to go. So those are just some things that I would like to share with you. I'd also like to share that one of the ways that you can get your Havurah going is by offering a workshop that we, through the Havurah Network, have been offering, which is called Wrestling with Zionism. And this is a storytelling workshop. Mark is now one of the facilitators, and it is a very gentle, low bar in terms of confrontation, way to get people involved and just have a chance to tell their story. How did they grow? How did their family relate to Israel? What's their story about the moment that they started wrestling with Zionism? So that's another thing that you could do if you wish to do something with your group before you actually even call it a Havurah. And so I'm going to stop there. That's a lot of information. And open the floor to questions, and I'll invite our wonderful speakers to answer. Do we have any questions? you can raise your hand, or if I'll turn it over to Jade and she can facilitate this part.
Or anything coming up that people would like to hear more about, or if there's a comment that you'd like to make from your perspective. We know there might be other stories on the call today that you're burning to share. Yeah, Shira, go ahead. I can read it in the chat, or if you'd like to read it yourself, let me know.
I can speak it. I'm curious about your processes for creating your founding documents. Like, I was just looking at the one, the Fringes founding document, and I'm just curious, like, how you all made those, if there were a lot of people part of that. Yeah.
So for the Fringes, the founding document about what kind of prayer life we wanted to have was 3 of us wrote the draft, and then we shared it at the first meeting, which was, I think, 25, 26 of us, and sort of got feedback and took ideas and incorporated them into that. That was going to be a temporary document, but it works. We revisited it when we turned 15, and we're like, yeah, we're still doing all of that, and we're still pretty happy about it. I will tell you that the original draft of that, and I found it one day when I was cleaning, is a ripped out page from a notebook of notes taken during an unending synagogue meeting where I scribbled to lesbian history. The woman who's the co-leader of Fringes, she and I were partners for 16 years. And then we still lead Fringes together. So we had scribbled to each other, oh my God, why are we still in this stupid meeting arguing for them to give us one scrap of what we want? Why don't we just start our own thing? So that's where it actually came from, was, notes during a synagogue meeting. But yeah, it was the 3 of us that really were driven to found the group, sat down and drafted that together. And it really was just, you see, it's just bullet points. Like, this is what we want. This is what we believe. Our non-Zionist statement, I actually wrote several months later, because some people were like, well, why are we non-Zionist? And I'm like, well, that's a really good idea. Actually, I'm not sure what I mean. So again, it was a draft statement. And it's still pretty true. I don't know if we're ever going to go over to calling ourselves anti-Zionist. I'm not sure. There's certainly some language in that I would not use now. I think at one point I say something about Arab, and now I would, of course, say Palestinian, but that was 2007. So I've decided to leave it. But then, I have a version that's got some footnotes like, okay, these years later, these things have changed.
Thanks, Elliot. Great question, Shira. Does anyone else want to chime in about sort of how you created your founding documents or visions?
Well, I guess I could jump in. That's a very good question. And I think one of the things that I really love about our Havurah, and it's not always the case, because I've been in groups where it's not the case, is how much kind of unity and trust we have as a group on the steering committee. So it meant that the process of writing up our initial statement of principles had a couple of go-arounds with a couple of people who took it on, and we pretty quickly, with some edits and comments, came to it. And I think what that speaks to is, if at all possible, to start your Havurah with a group of people who are on the same page. It's not, you may not be able to do that, but that made it much easier for us to come up with our document. And I hope that answers Shira's question.
Totally. Thank you. May, anything you want to chime in on this question?
As I said, I kind of joined the community officially, like partially sometime into their founding. And so I think in some ways we're still sharpening and clarifying our, like, you can read some on our website, but I think the thing that's been most important for our community, and you know, I mentioned this in the kind of like do's and don'ts, is to be anti-Zionist from the start. This is also something that I learned from my mentor, Rabbi Brent Rosen in Chicago, who spoke to me a lot about what it means to start out as anti-Zionist and what it means to not, and how hard it is to build community and then have a community of Zionists and non-Zionists and anti-Zionists, and then be like, well, we want to be anti-Zionist, and how it can be easier to start and say, we are anti-Zionist, anyone is welcome, but this is our values, or these are our values, this is our value, and you're welcome to be a part of it.
Thank you all. This is inspiring. Sasha raises up a question in the chat. I think it's looking at you, Mark. Can anyone speak to creating the separate Havurah versus sort of one inside an existing shul? What was getting buy-in from the leadership like with Kehila? And you spoke to this little with the Middle East Peace Committee. I think this was with how other community members who don't hold the same views reacted and what that process was like. But how'd you wear them down, Mark?
Okay, well, that's a good question. Well, we did seek a meeting with, well, Kehila has a couple of rabbis, and with one of the key rabbis, and we had a really good, I think, open meeting where we were very clear where we were coming from, and the rabbi was very respectful. They listened carefully, and we were clear where there were where we weren't on the same page. So, for example, the rabbi made clear that from their perspective, they were not going to make Palestine and support of Palestine central to the work of Kehila at this point. So when we asked about wanting to hear Palestine mentioned from the Bima or things like that, they said, well, that's going to have to come from you, and we will give some opening to that. But from their perspective, that Kehila was not ready to become an anti-Zionist congregation. I think that we're lucky that we're able to have that kind of open and honest relationship with the spiritual leadership of the congregation without feeling that we have to agree on everything and feeling welcomed. I mean, there was a Tisha B'Av event where we were actually invited to be one of the presenters, we were a little surprised at that, and shocks at the Yom Kippur service. Palestine was mentioned, which we have not been expecting, because that was not the impression that we were given by the rabbi. But so I think that just our presence and our being very principled and very open and pushing, but not pushing too hard, has sort of moved the situation forward. I don't know if that kind of answers the question.
Wow. Yes. Thank you, Mark. Transformation. And then I think we have time for one final question. Anne, I was wondering, would you like to ask it? That you put in the chat?
Sure. My question was, are there existing groups all around? And are there groups that are open to new people joining the group? Or is this strictly about starting, a new group on our own?
I wonder, yeah, thank you, Anne. What a wonderful question. I wonder, Melissa, if you have thoughts on that, because that's sort of right in your wheelhouse.
Yes. Well, actually, all of the above. There are groups, and each group is different in terms of whether they're open or not. But I think generally most groups that exist are friendly and open. And I did not bring a list here of those, but you can be in touch with me. and my email is melissa@jvp.org. Super easy. And we really welcome individuals who maybe are not like up to starting it, but would like to join with other people. So if you would like to write to me and let me know, I am in this neighborhood, I am in this area, or what you only want to be online, then you're sort of, you have the world open to you. And we will start the process of getting people united. Yeah.
Thank you.
And that really was a great segue, because I wanted to ask everyone to please be in touch, to please let me know if your Havurah is open to new members. Elliot has already put out a fabulous invitation to come every second Saturday to join in. And I think if you're in the Bay Area, you can be in touch with Mark. And if you're in Connecticut, I think you can be in touch with me for, Mending Minion. So those are 3 that we already know about. Be in touch with me and I will unite people. I know that there are people here from Boston and Jamaica Plain. I know that there's a couple of people right here. So maybe this is where you get to meet each other. And I'm going to invite each of our speakers tonight to end with either a prayer or a blessing. And whoever feels ready to share that prayer or blessing for our work, please go ahead.
Yeah, I've got one queued up because I write services, so let me just pull it up. So one way at Fringes, one thing that we evolved together was a way of reading aloud that doesn't get low and slow, that's lively and engaged. And Zoom has made that really hard for us. So here's what we do when we read all together. Anyone who wants to is invited to unmute. But here's the trick so that Zoom isn't too awful. You have to speak so quietly that you can hear other people. We're tempted online to speak loudly enough that other people can hear us. I invite you to flip that upside down. Speak so quietly that you can hear other people, and then we can all read together. And this is a wonderful liturgy about how we start the difficult work in the world. So everyone who wants to join is invited to unmute, back away from your microphone, speak quietly, and we can read this together as an intention. So we start. We begin wherever we can.
Wherever we can.
We begin
Begin
in our thoughts,
our thoughts,
in our one-on-one
one-on-one
interactions,
interactions,
in our choices about how we will use what privilege we have. We begin by talking about it. We begin with awareness. We begin over and over and over. We begin by listening, by hearing our grief, our rage, our arrogance, our ignorance, our brainwashing. And beginning is no small thing.
Amen.
Unless you wonder where one finds liturgy, that was from a book that came out in 1992 of advice for lesbians starting 12-step programs.
Thank you, Elliot.
Come in. What the hell? Hey.
stop.
Okay. Mia, yeah. Okay. May or Mark, do you have a prayer poem or blessing you'd like to share with us?
Sure. I'm just saying that I'll be blessed with finding communities in which we feel at home in which we feel seen in, and in which we feel safe in. And I hope that you can all find those communities or build them, find your people wherever you are, and know that you have community around the country and virtually when you need to.
Amen.
Well, I don't know if I have anything like a prayer, but I have an appreciation. I just so appreciate all the people here on this Zoom conference, this call, and the people who stick to this work day in and day out and are committed to making a better world, bringing about justice for Palestine. That appreciation continues to inspire me and allows me to continue to do the work.
So beautiful. Thank you, Mark. That's a prayer. Amen. So we are about to wrap. I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you, Elliot, May, Mark. Thank you, Jade, for working with me on this project. We made it happen. You made it happen. And everybody who is here made it happen because I know everybody here has already done so much. Please, please stay in touch, be in touch. And I am looking forward to the next steps with you. Thank you so much. And we'll music our way out, if you will.
Yeah, hang on. Give me a second here. Let me find something.
And anybody is welcome to unmute and to.
One second.
All right. Didn't warn you on this. Sorry.
Okay, so here I'll close this out. This was actually a original song written for Fringes by our musical leader Otter from a poem by Lucille Clifton. And you can just gleefully listen to it and as you leave. Hang on. There we go.
The leaves believe such letting go is love. 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 Such love is faith, such faith is grace, such grace is God. Such love is faith, such faith is grace, such grace is God. I agree with the leaves, I agree with the leaves, I agree with the leaves, I agree with the leaves. The leaves believe such letting go is love. The leaves believe such letting go is love. The leaves believe Such love is faith, such faith is grace, such grace is God. Such love is faith, such faith is grace, such grace is God. Such love is faith, such faith is grace, such grace is God. Such love is faith, such faith is grace, such grace is God. Oh, see, something like your love.
That whole song file is on our website. So if you want to just sing Lucille Clifton, you can go there and find it.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for being here. So we're going to have just a minute of debrief with our, yeah.
Sorry.